Good morning, everyone. I'd like to go ahead and start the meeting. It's 8 o'clock. We do have a pretty heavy agenda here, and naturally want to go ahead and get started here. Mr. Moore, would you like to call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Hines.
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets.
Present.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Ms. Link. Ms. Revel.
Here.
Mr. Scott. You have quorum.
Thank you. Commissioners Link and Commissioner Scott are traveling today, both in situations that were beyond their control. And wish they could be here today, but they could not. All right. Dr. Patton, it sounds like you may have an introduction for us today.
Yes, I do. Members of the commission, I am indeed privileged to be able to introduce to you Mrs. Cheryl Spivey, who is the city's new Chief Financial Officer. Mrs. Spivey comes to us from the state of North Carolina, particularly from the city of Fayetteville, North Carolina, but she has served over her 30-plus years in North Carolina municipal government in several cities. Mrs. Spivey comes to us deep and steeped in debt management and financial background. She also has been heralded as one of the top CFOs within the state of North Carolina. So just in her short, how many days have you been here? I'm on my 291st of my third year.
I'm on my fourth week.
Fourth week, okay. On her fourth week, she has brought indeed energy and synergy, and we already have realized her deep knowledge of finances in this short period of time. So please welcome Mrs. Cheryl Spivey.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Welcome to our city. Sounds like you're adjusting well already.
I am, and I live just across the cranes.
Sounds great. All right, Mr. Moore, it sounds like we have another staff introduction today.
Certainly. Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chairman, or I'm sorry, we're not Vice Chairman yet, but members of the board. Certainly like to welcome our newest member to the team and introduce Ms. Ashley Henley. Ms. Henley comes to us formerly working with the Tidewater Builders Association, but she is originally from New Orleans, Louisiana. She is a graduate of Old Dominion University. She has an extensive background in government relations, economic development, and legislative services. So we are excited to have her on the team. Ms. Henley will bring about our business retention program. So we look forward to bringing forth some additional information about our program, but certainly want to welcome her to the team and introduce her to the board.
Fantastic, and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move right into our minutes, the May 15th minutes. So it came out in our packets. I trust that you've all had an opportunity to review and read. If you have nothing to add or amend in the said minutes, the chair would entertain a motion.
I do have something
Yes,
to
Commissioner.
amend. I think because of the discussion that we had at the last meeting concerning the CDs, I would want to see Commissioner Scott's remarks made a part of the minutes, because he did say that the principle of CDs never changes throughout the maturity of the CD, and it's important because of the follow-up information we did receive.
Okay.
You could certainly go back to recording to see where he said it. And on page 2, Commissioner Kelly gave a statement. I think you want to strike the word "of," if I'm not mistaken. It's on page 2 with Commissioner Kelly's remarks. And with those changes, I will make the motion to approve the minutes.
If that's acceptable to do, I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion. Second.
All right.
Call the roll, sir.
Mr. Hines.
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets.
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Ms. Revel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, that moves us into our financials. Naturally, we're actually going to take this time to maybe hear from our treasurer. I think he had a comment or two, but we're going to delay the vote on the financials as the city finance office does have some transition that I would like for them to bring that back, maybe as two financials at our next meeting, so they can get accustomed and acquainted to our books. If you have anything else to add.
Yes, sir. Just wanted to clarify the financials. What we had here recently, some of the commissioners may know that administrative staff and economic development has been out of the office probably about a week or so. During that time, we did receive, in between that transition of her being on vacation, we did receive the statements for the upcoming meeting, for this meeting. However, because she was out of the office, we were not able to complete our portion of the financial statements. So therefore, we were unable to complete our portion, so we were unable to have finance complete their portion. Certainly, we could have had finance do Ms. Spivey and her staff could do a financial report, but certainly this board has consistently been specific in what they would like to see. So therefore, we wanted to make sure we had the exact items there. There was certainly nothing against the staff of finance. Certainly, they've done a great job for us as we've gone forward throughout this. Yes, there has been some change on their staff, but this was purely a missed opportunity on our part. What we will do going forward, however, is we will take this as an opportunity to look at our internal practices to make sure if there is someone out of the office now that we have additional staff and additional staff coming, that we have some alternative methods to getting this information put together. So I just wanted to put that out
Well,
there.
it's understandable. I mean, you
Yeah.
all have been working with very limited
Yes,
staff,
yes.
and that really does not concern me that is the case. In fact, this time of year, I think, if I recall, in past years, normally gets to be that with the audit about to occur, outside audit and everything. So
Sure.
I think I can speak for the other commissioners and say that's very understandable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you.
Stevens.
It's no concern here either. And Mr. Kelly, I think, did have a few comments.
Yes, and just to piggyback, since it's already in the minutes, we did discuss it at the last meeting. We had a few questions that were directed towards finance, and we did get a response back on a few of them on the notes. One of the ones that was probably one of the larger ones was the conversation we had about the brokered CD that was placed. There was some questions. We did get some clarity on it. The questions really arose because it made it seem like there was an extra $196 that was not invested, but it claimed that it was in a insured fund. Well, that led a lot of us to assume that the others were not, but that was not the case. There was a total of 5 CDs, it looks like, that were broken up in there into the $1,006,000 total. They are all FDIC insured. They have a set guaranteed return and a value. With the broker CDs, you may see them drop in value, rise in value, but at the end of the day, you're going to get what you have at the end of the maturity date. What you're going to see every month is you might see a rise and a fall in the value of those, but really it's not germane. And the main thing is the value you have at the end of the year. And that's what your rate of return that was put forth in there. Another one that we have that we can make action on at the next meeting was our operating expense. We were wondering why we were over budget on one of the line items. We had budgeted $2,000 and we had a $2,600 charge in there. That's something we can easily just reallocate at the next meeting. We go through that financial, so I would just ask that we have that added into the next agenda just so we can address it then. That way it gives us some time to figure out how much staff might believe they need in that account. Following up on the pooled cash, there was a little discrepancy here just on the question of how we read our pooled cash, and just for finance sake so they know, I think in the email we got, it made it seem like reconciling pooled cash was something new, but it's actually something we've been doing for years. We do it monthly, and the reason being is because every month, well, actually it's not monthly now, but every quarter, we would shift the pooled cash
Right.
over to the city. We reconcile it every month, but the actual transfer happens quarterly. And so basically, we were just trying to make sure we understood the monies that were transferring from us to the city. And it was a nice little sheet of paper that broke it all down for us. The reason that came about is because about 6 years ago, there was a massive amount of money sitting in pooled cash that wasn't getting transferred over, and nobody could allocate for it. So going forward, that was our mechanism to make sure that didn't happen again. So, and that's all I have to add on the financials, so we can vote on the addition next.
Commissioner, I'd like for you to know that Mrs. Lisa Blackford is no longer with the city. She has joined a team in Chesapeake very close to her home, and she does have children and a husband that was deployed. And so now we will have with us during our meetings Mrs. Susan Evans, who is our comptroller, who will be here with Mrs. Spivey.
Perfect.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
She's long tenured. She's not new to the city.
Right.
Okay.
I believe anybody you put at this table is competent to handle it,
Yes.
Dr. Patton. So
I was thinking he's
no concerns at all there.
And Mrs. I'm going to change your thing.
Yes, ma'am.
I think it is appropriate to mention that going forward.
Because this is being taped.
Thank you.
I think it is important to mention going forward that we really no longer need to vote on our financials, but instead we will file them for audit because it can create liability for this authority if we take votes on the financials that have not been audited. And that's coming straight out of Robert's rules. So just going forward instead, and we used to do that. I don't know why it changed, but we need to change back to just filing the reports for audit instead of voting on them.
Does that sound reasonable to?
Sure, that's okay.
Well, Turner, I know it's reasonable.
Well, this will be the first time we've been having voted on financials going forward. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
But I think when Mr.
Yeah, we used to
Thomason,
not vote.
I think when Mr. Thomason was chair, we started doing that
Yeah,
filing
before that.
for audit.
We've been voting on them every month since I've been here.
Well,
Well, we voted on filing them.
We voted on
for
filing
audit.
for a period of
Okay.
time, and then we got back into the routine of actually voting on the financials.
Gotcha.
And I think kind of the assumption the whole time was is that we were filing them for audit.
Yeah.
But that's, if we want to actually add that in, and actually, that would be, I'm sure, something
just file them.
I'll think you'll be here tomorrow.
Director Moore and the new chairperson will set the agenda for that going forward, I would imagine, so. Okay.
I have one
Please.
suggestion on the reviewing of the June statements to see if there's some money that you should be transferred between lines. It may be best if Director Moore, you do that prior to June 30. If we do that, we can get it into the June 30 statements. If we wait until after June 30, it will continue to be reflected as it is.
You mean the, for business? You mean the allocating of our operating, like the business development expense?
Right.
Well, currently, I don't have a set of financials in front of me from the month prior, but I'm not sure. But I think it was set at $2,000.
Yeah.
And it was year-to-date 2,600. So I guess if that's the case, then we would go ahead and make an amendment or a motion to change the budget on that line item number. And I guess at this point, I'd probably defer to staff to find out what they think would be appropriate.
We'll look into that, see what we need.
All right, well, you want to make that today?
That would, if it's made today, it can be reflected, otherwise it can't.
All right.
So
Well,
this is-
5,000.
Yeah,
For
go
the
ahead.
time
It was
being,
5,000.
let's
It
just
was
do
over 23 or 26.
2,600 is what it was.
Yeah.
Let's just make it 5,000 for the time being. If we need to revisit it,
Okay.
we can.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion that we amend the budgeted line item for business development from $2,000 to $5,000.
You have a motion?
Second.
And a second? And this
Thank you.
is amending our current fiscal year budget from 2,000 to 5,000.
Okay. So Ms. Kelly, and seconded by Mr. Jiggins.
Jiggets.
All right. Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Rebel?
Yes.
Motion carries. So we'll have that process.
That's wonderful. Great discussion. All right, this moves us into our old business and our report back from our ad hoc committee regarding the 2019 officers. I will turn that over to Commissioner.
Okay, because Mr. Scott's not here. So the officers that were presented at the last meeting were myself, Vice Chair Karen Kelly, and Treasurer Ms. Jiggets. And this is the recommendation of the nominating committee.
Okay, and I would take that as your motion. All right, we have a motion on the floor. Chair is looking for a second.
You might be the only one.
I'll go ahead and second, sure.
Do all three at once?
Do we need to elect each
If
one
it's the will of the
individually,
board.
or?
You can do all three at once if it's the will of the board, do it that way.
All right, I say let's go ahead and do the entire slate.
Okay. Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
And Ms. Rebel?
Yes.
All right, motion carries.
Congratulations, officers. I'll keep your seat warm for the rest of
Thank
this
you.
meeting.
I appreciate that.
You can have this one come July. Congratulations.
All over now, or is
It rolls over in July.
July.
For the first meeting in July.
I'll be trailing you, following you, shadowing you.
It's a small shadow.
Well, we got a very busy day for Commissioner Revel, because the next item up is the local incentives program, and I know we've had quite some good discussion about this, and I'd like to maybe hear from the kind of kick off our discussion and final vote on this after you make the presentation and we have some discussion.
Okay. If you remember, Ms. Link and I were working on the, I guess, the changes that were suggested for the entire year prior to the retreat back in the spring. And we did vote on those changes, but as it got close to the time for implementation, I heard from Mr. Moore that they were having some difficulty defining the I guess the boundaries for the Churchland area that was supposed to be in the first year rollout of the changes that we made at our retreat. And the suggestion by staff was that we open the program, the entire program, up to the entire city. And we can have this discussion later, but Ms. Link and I met with Mr. Moore last Wednesday and listened to his reasoning for this, and we pretty much agreed that the geographic boundaries were artificial and that they left some potential businesses out, and they made it a little harder for staff to do their job. So we agreed with Mr. Moore's recommendation of staff that those boundaries be eliminated. Now, just to refresh you on what else we had decided on at the spring meeting, we changed the incentive amounts, I believe, to $1,500 for the facade improvement, $15,000 for the facade improvement grant, and $15,000 for the interior build-out grant, and we left safety and security the way it was at $2,000 max. And we added signage up to $2,500. So after our discussion last Wednesday, we decided that we probably should increase those amounts on both the interior build-out and the facade improvement to $25,000. Mr. Moore presented another concern that staff had, that businesses are being delayed in doing their build-outs and their facade improvements by our process, which is to bring the applications to the full board. So what we decided as a committee to do, and what we're recommending to the full board, is that anything up to $5,000 would be at Mr. Moore's discretion. He doesn't have to bring it to the board. But between $5,000 and $10,000, the subcommittee Ms. Link and myself, or whomever moving forward is on that subcommittee, should convene by conference call on any applications between the amount of $5,000 and $10,000. And then anything over $10,000 would come to the full board, as it always has. So these are the recommendations of the ad hoc committee on the local incentive programs, and I'd be pleased to open this up for board discussion.
I'll start off on this.
Yes, Commissioner Jiggets.
Yes. And I intentionally didn't weigh in when we were going back and forth with the emails, because I wanted to really see what the mindset was. And I get it. I think, Kathy, you summarized what I would have come into the discussion and said, that as long as we keep in mind, we can delegate authority, but we cannot delegate responsibility. At the end of the day, this is the EDA's incentives grant program on behalf of the city, and regardless if it's $5,000, where our director of development would be up to $5,000 making the decision, is still our program, and the buck stops with us. And so we have to keep that in mind as we decide today if we're going to approve it as Commissioner Revel has discussed. So those are my thoughts.
Mr. Kelly, do you have any?
I do. Piggybacking off of what Commissioner Jiggets mentioned, I'd have to agree. I think that the best way to solve that is just to make them all at the discretion between the ad hoc and
Up to
staff.
$10,000.
Up to 10,000, because I don't think that should take too much more time out. It also, if we're not getting financials now except for once a year, then you don't know what money went out. You might get an updated report, but that's something that can be easily forgotten. And I think for accountability, I'd have to agree. I don't think it would necessarily harm or delay staff at that case if you just had to get a hold of two people on an ad hoc committee to discuss it and run it by them.
We decided that it could probably occur within 24 to 48 hours,
I would
a
imagine
conference
so.
call to discuss the applications. He could send them to us by email. And logistically, I think that Ms. Link and I agreed that that was very doable.
Commissioner Kelly, repeat the reference to only getting financials once a year.
Because I want to make sure we're clear on that too,
Yeah,
because
what do
when we
you-
were talking about the financials, if we're not voting on these financials monthly and we're just assuming we're looking at the audited financials at the end of the year.
No, that's not what I was
We'll
saying.
still receive them as a matter
We're
of
gonna get them
record.
monthly.
You just file
We receive
those.
them, but we're not
gonna
voting
discuss-
on them.
Well, we're going to discuss them. I mean, if you
Okay.
have questions, we
Yes,
want the
yes,
report
yes.
to remain as it is,
Yes,
because
it
we're
will.
pleased
Okay.
getting the pool cash reconciliation, or everything will be
The same.
the same.
You still have a chance to
Yes.
amend.
Oh,
and
yeah,
things
we
of
will
that nature. Yes,
yeah,
sir.
certainly, no. So I'm glad
so-
that we had that conversation. Yeah, everything's the same. It's just that
Telling them.
for liability purposes, we as the authority will not take a vote on what is presented. We will file it for audit. That's the only difference.
I'm good with that too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just want to hit all my notes there, if that's all right, Mr. Chair.
Please say.
So that's my recommendation, would be to make it to where the ad hoc committee, at least you have two commissioners who are aware of what's coming through. I'm glad we kept the FIG amount at 25 to 25, or in the LIP to 25, because just seeing, I know what these budgets cost to do a true facade change. If you're talking about changing a couple awnings, that's one thing, but if somebody has to reface the entire brick on the outside of their building, and awnings, and new windows, and everything to kind of bring this thing up to par, having the threshold of 25,000 is a nice way to make sure the needle's in the right direction to actually move some stuff around. I did put together, I don't know if staff has it, but I had created GIS boundary for Churchland. If the commission's good with it and staff's good with it, I'd be happy to submit it. If it's the wish of the commission to open this up at large to the entire city, I would consider it as well. My hesitation with that is because the original purpose of the facade improvement grant was to fix areas of concentration where it's highly walkable areas. Areas where you had a lot of tourists, a lot of people walking, not so much driving by. The areas we have were Old Town at the time, and granted, most of Old Town has taken advantage of that. So I'd be okay with shutting something down in one district and opening up in another one. But I think that the fear you have when you open it up at large is you might have somewhere in an industrial complex open up to do a facade to change a couple things or get some funding, but it really doesn't benefit at large because you're not seeing the concentration of efforts in one spot. That's what I meant by diluting it. So that was my concern. That's my only statement on it. Aside from that, I really appreciate all the work the ad hoc committee put into it because I know it's not the easiest task and it's not exactly a fun task. So
I think the concern was that the boundaries are somewhat arbitrary, if you will. And I'm thinking of particular applications in, say, Craddock, that caused a little bit of angst. And so, Mr. Moore, please feel free to chime in. But there are businesses that recently have inquired, and they are outside of the area, and we certainly want those businesses in Portsmouth.
Sure.
So,
We have had, from a staff standpoint, we have received I think as of Friday, 5 different requests for businesses that will not be in the changed locations, the changed boundaries. They will still not be eligible for the grant unless we open up the grant to the entire city. And these would be more than just beautification grants or making things walkable. This would be essentially an incentive to a business to locate in a specific existing building. So because of that, we felt that this could be utilized not only as the walkability and so on and so forth, but certainly as an incentive for a business to locate into a facility. Again, speaking on that, I can't tell you who those businesses are, but I can tell you once this opens up, we will have at least 4 applications that will come in for these grants.
Madam City Manager would like
Yes,
to chime in.
also members of the commission, you remember during your joint meeting with City Council, there was the inquiry as to, the boundaries, and Mr. Moody in particular brought up, you're not including Churchland. Where with that, there were other areas of the city that felt that we were not being inclusive of where they were in the city. So I think this is great.
I think I'm going to jump in now. My kind of thoughts on what this is, and as far as the whole city, I think it's not a bad idea to see how this is received. Naturally, anytime you do something new on this scale with the budget that we currently have for this, naturally there's concern, and in terms of how far can our dollar go, what's the impact of our dollar. I'm in favor of let's at least try this for a year and see what happens. It's kind of my thought on that. Regarding the 25K, I think that was a very wise move, moving us from the 15 to the 25. We want to have a visible impact on what we do and how we do it. And I think also that will give even more incentive for that business, since they're putting 50% in anyway, a $50,000 a facade improvement looks a lot better than one that's significantly less at $30,000. Regarding delegation of authority, I guess I'm probably going to be in the minority on this, and I kind of look at our role here is setting this as our policy and allowing and delegating authority with proper oversight. And that's our job, is kind of the oversight, in my opinion, and to set policy and allow staff to do what they do, with naturally, a monthly report back of what Mr. Moore would approve. So I kind of stand by my thoughts of allowing Mr. Moore some autonomy up to the 10,000 to allow staff to vet them and to approve them with a report back to this authority. That being said, I'm not going to withhold my approval of what this group has put forth, but I do felt like I needed to put that out there that it was, my concern in all of this is speed to market. regarding to that. So I think if we have issues with the ad hoc, whether it be the current ad hoc or if Commissioner Revel or should be Chair Revel decides to make any changes on that, if there's any concerns in terms of getting approvals in a timely manner, we may want to revisit our decision on that. But with that, I overall think the commission, the ad hoc did a great job. So thank you.
Thank you. And for clarification, what we're saying is that up to 10,000, our Director of Development.
Is what I was asking for, but up to,
No,
Up to 5 is
That's
the
what he's
commission-
at.
that's what I was
who's
advocating.
advocating that?
I was advocating up
Okay,
to,
oh, so you still
The
stand with
committee,
your,
the committee
okay.
stands by our recommendation.
Up to 5,
Up
and
to
then
5
from
to
5 to 10
Director.
is the ad hoc.
And I made the recommendation, maybe up to 10, the ad hoc and committee, and the
So
director
he's
staff.
saying, so we've got 3 things on the table here that we can consider. My concern, and I'm willing to go with Mr. Kelly, is that, just as you described it, this money is, the commission is accountable for the money, has a fiduciary accountability for this money. So I think that having a decision made outside with no input from us, in my opinion, is not the wisest course of action. And if it be the will of this group that all things up to $10,000, all applications up to $10,000 just need that extra level of the ad hoc committee, then that's what I'd be willing to do that. So I can take the $5,000 off the table. Because that seemed to be what you were advocating.
Oh, no. I wasn't advocating for anything other than clarification.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
all. That's all I wanted was clarification as to, what the ad hoc committee is recommending. And I see the bar keeps moving to the
Well-
left and to the right, so just, help us out here. What's the motion going to be?
The original recommendation from the ad hoc committee was up to $5,000 at Mr. Moore's recommendation, 5 to 10,000 with the additional layer of the ad hoc committee, and over $10,000 full application to the full commission.
so we have that motion. Would anybody like to second that
Yes,
motion?
that's my motion.
Oh, okay.
You just said.
I'll second.
All right, we have Commissioner Revel with the first, Commissioner Jiggets with the
It
second.
really doesn't need a second, it's a recommendation of the
Well,
committee.
again,
Bring it
Okay,
to
now
vote.
this is not, this isn't the whole recommendation. We're doing this in parts. Am I getting that correct?
no, it's to take the entire
This is the
recommendation.
geography of the entire city and
It was the
everything.
whole thing,
This
the
whole
limits, and the delegation chart as we outlined.
That was the one piece that we were kind of at odds with.
Yeah, about the.
Commissioner, Director Moore has a question of clarification.
Just
It's a point of order.
a couple of things we want to make sure we, as we discussed in the ad hoc committee meeting, there's some other particulars I think need to be put out there. One, certainly anyone can, if you will, appeal to the board for any type of if something comes up and staff thinks that it's not, for some reason, staff makes a decision or the ad hoc makes a decision that is not favorable for a business for some reason, then certainly any item can come before the board. Also, I think we've made the caveat that all shopping centers have to come before the board. Originally, it was they would be excluded. We do not want to exclude anyone, but certainly a shopping center is something that's a more comprehensive plan and project. So all of that would have to go before the board, if you so will to, again, approve. $25,000, and I'll lean to Mr. Kelly and anyone else in the development world. $25,000 is not necessarily a lot when it comes to a shopping center. However, there are smaller shopping centers, and they vary in size. We discussed certainly to exclude shopping centers, and I think there's been some discussion potentially about including them. Staff is certainly either way, but if you do include shopping centers, they need to all go before the board.
Couldn't agree more.
And let's make sure all of these things we're discussing are in a written policy that you will provide to the board individually at the next meeting.
Yes. So this will be just the approval of the changes. We will then change said applications and guidelines for the program and present those at the July meeting.
Any further discussion?
I just have, and this isn't really related to this right here, but I just want to make sure, because it sounded earlier that you may have 4 opportunities that didn't fall into here. We'll make sure it's clear that anybody who brings an opportunity to you, it may not have to fit in here. It can still come to us as a commission.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Because I don't want to hold anything up. It doesn't have to fit in this guideline for somebody to
Right,
bring
Certainly.
something to
Certainly.
us.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was the premise for the expanding the boundaries, because at the end of the day, I think the other discussion was, excuse me, that at the director's discretion, I can bring something to you. Ultimately, I will end up bringing 4 applications to you.
Regardless.
Regardless. So that was the thought process
Let
behind it.
me try to clarify the motion
Okay.
for Ms. Jiggets and for all of us. It is the recommendation of the ad hoc committee that we remove boundaries and make the local incentive program available citywide, that the monetary limits are $25,000 for the facade improvement grant, $25,000 for the interior build-out grant, and $2,000 for the safety and security grant. The applications will come before, will be at the discretion of Mr. Moore, up to $5,000 for any grant program, and between $5,000 and $10,000 will come to the ad hoc committee, who reports back to the full board. And then anything over $10,000 will be considered by the full board.
There's one more caveat we need to add. Recognizing that for that budgetary item for fiscal year, once we run out,
Yes,
that has to be included.
right. So once
Yeah.
the budgeted amount is expended, that's it.
It's first come, first served.
For the
First
fiscal
come-
year.
It's first come, first served
For the
for each fiscal
For
year,
each
yes.
fiscal year.
Every fiscal year.
All right, so we had a clarified motion here. Mr. Moore would like to add one item as well, but I do want to make sure that we have this as part of our policy as well, is that the items that Mr. Moore approves, he will report back to us on a monthly basis, where he reports back, so that way we have the appropriate oversight.
Yeah,
Okay.
there'll be monthly report backs
Okay.
from both the ad hoc and
Okay.
staff. Just want to have one point of clarification, and then one thing we need to make sure we add that, again, we'll make sure all the details are laid out here as much as possible. This up to 5,000 and then up to 10,000, are we saying that is the project amount? Or are you saying that is the grant amount?
Grant.
So that would mean up to 5,000, that means someone is coming with an application of up to $10,000 for a project of up to $10,000, not a problem. So we can approve up to a $5,000 grant, not a problem. We did change one other thing, and this, I think, again, benefits the program. As of right now, once a property utilizes the grant, and they exhaust all 25 and 10, as it is right now, they are done for the lifetime of the property. We have instituted in this policy that you can do it in 5 years after there's been, now, so right now, if someone comes in, we'll use a $25,000 facade improvement. If someone uses 10,000, they still have 15,000, right? But once that 25,000 is utilized across the property, they have 5 years from that date to utilize it again. That way, if the property were to change hands, a new tenant, so on and so forth, there's an opportunity, a new sign, so on and so forth. But that also keeps us from changing signs every 2 years and things of that nature. So just want to make sure that is in the policy as well, because that changes the dynamic of this.
Okay. Are we all good? Any additional items?
And I'll be quiet.
Okay. Well, actually, no, you're going to need to call the roll on this one.
All right, so We're all in grants? Okay, Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Rebel?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And again, thank you to the members of the ad hoc.
It took time.
Great job with that.
Yeah, no, it's great.
All right, next item in our old business is the EDA property update, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Moore.
Yes. Quickly, we've had significant success, as we talked about over the last few meetings, about staff's relationship with DeVaris and what we have had happening with all of our properties, all 8 of the properties that the EDA has, either under contract, pending closure, or in some type of negotiations. We have the final property that we can bring to you will be in closed session later on this morning. What you have here, we did still ask for explanations as far as how DeVaris does what they do. And I do have this here in digital format for you all. But quickly, just using this as an example, this is an exposure score. What happens is, this is the property 3335, 3345, which is at the corner of Victory and Greenwood here in the city. This shows that approximately this property has been looked at about 12,000 times in the last 90 days on LoopNet. This also provides a map showcasing where those visitors are looking from. Where are they currently located? So you can see the majority of them West Coast, Texas, a lot of the East Coast. So this almost 4-acre property, vacant land on a hard corner has been looked at about 12,400 or 12,550 times roughly. That is great. What DeVaris does from this is they can see just even more of a breakdown in their system as far as the type of industry. They may not be able to see exactly who it is, but they can narrow it down to the type of industry, the size of the company, and then send out corresponding emails to then mark an additional response and go forward. We have this on every property. We don't have all the properties up here because most of them are under contract, so we don't need the exposure scores. But even 3336 across the street, again, almost an acre piece of property, over 14,000 views. More than likely because it would make sense. This has 12,000 views, that's directly across the street. That would make sense. So they've gone in, done a search for land of a certain size, probably 1 to 4 acres in the city, and this is how they follow and track that. The average for the properties is right around 13,000 for all the properties that you have left. That's someone that is still quote unquote available. So I say this and show this to say that DeVaris has done a great job up until this point, working with staff to make sure that we have exposure throughout the United States, and to make sure that we're involved with these projects. Again, we will have evidence of that later on this morning. But once you approve, I'm being hopeful here, the property later this morning, you will officially be done as far as what we can bring forward. And then again, we will talk about additional properties again in closed session. But I stand to answer any questions that you may have.
Madam City Manager.
Yes, Mr. Moore, access to these properties, it's through DeVaris's website, or is it through our website and DeVaris's website?
It's through both. It will be through our website. We're still working on the tiering system and having those properties show up. But this is literally in DeVaris's. This is actually with LoopNet, which is very similar to a CoStar. This is the industry standard. So brokers from all over the country, all over the world can see these properties just by doing a search. This is what they're seeing, and this is how they come up. And this is just a starting point. So if we can go from 12,000 all the way down to that 1, that's great.
Have we always previewed our properties internationally and nationally through the system, or is this new?
You know, I think things have changed. We have found ways to provide more exposure, ways that we market the property. We sat down with DeVaris and really looked at how they do things, and we've come with this kind of decision to say, look, let's start from a wide funnel and let's take it down. I mean, I'm happy to say it works. So it is working. We are, again, set to close on a property, fingers crossed, next week. We are, again, moving forward on the property across the street that you all just approved last month. Moving forward with other development agreements. And again, this is all property that will go back on the tax roll. This is all property that we feel, and you all have held some since 1981. But they're receiving exposure such as this. So we think it's a great opportunity, but wanted to make sure you all were aware of what they're doing and the job that they're doing.
That's impressive. You could have an acre on the beach and not get 12,000, 13,000. And have it on every real estate, a residential real estate listing in the area, and you wouldn't get that. That's, I think a lot of these properties have been on CoStar, but I don't know about LoopNet. That's a pretty impressive figure.
I'm going to say, Mr. Moore, I just want to thank you for bringing this to us. As when we made this decision, I believe 2 years ago now, a little over maybe, with DeVaris. I was very adamant about getting these reports on a 90-day, cycle, because when we talk about fiduciary duties and we talk about appropriate oversight, this falls right into that. When we're talking about dollars and cents, that's great, but there's a value to these properties that lends to the growth of our city. So I thank you for the diligence there, and I just like to encourage us to continue to see these days for the properties that we have on our books, and I guess we're going to need to get some more properties, it sounds like.
We got some in mind.
Yeah, we have something right.
Don't
We'll talk later.
All right,
careful
sounds
for what
good.
you wish for.
That's right. We'll talk later.
Sounds good. And Madam City Manager?
Yes, I'd like to say that I think I heard Vice Mayor say a couple of weeks ago that in her tenure, and she is a long tenure here, she never remembered all properties, and I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, well, I was quoted from this meeting, and that was the truth. I don't ever recall knowing that everything the EDA had under its control was in play.
Right. That's
Of
commendable.
the items being marketed by
Yes.
by EDA,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, and I think I
we
was
got-
looking at this and thinking back to that regional meeting. Mr. Moore, I can't recall whether it was HREDA or where we were in Norfolk at the Hilton, and
Yes.
the man, the different men were the consultants,
Yes.
and the
Yes.
way. I mean, the world has changed,
Yes.
and so the guy in Seattle or Houston is on the internet, or the consultant is. It's not even the company.
Right.
That's amazing.
Yep. All right.
Very good.
Anything to add, Commissioners? Are we good?
No, I think this is impressive. And going forward, there is an emerging type of specialist called a data scientist that I think could probably play a role in economic development as you actually put together a coding program as to those prospects out there worldwide who would benefit with a location in a city. And I find that very interesting too, that is something that could benefit the city of Portsmouth.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly.
All right. Mr. Moore, thank you very much for that update there.
You're
Next item of whole business is our prospective joint EDA PPIC meeting. I'll turn it over to Mr. Moore.
Yes, just wanted to remind you all that the board did decide they would like to have twice a year a joint meeting with the PPIC. I think we all felt that the summer time frame and then potentially the fall, late fall, early winter were good time frames. So we have set this for July 17th, which is your normal meeting date, and same time, same place, and we will put together an agenda. But certainly want to have the opportunity for you all to discuss opportunities for collaboration. I think that certainly speaks to what the city manager has spoken about over the last year, is the collaboration. And so just want to remind you of that. We'll put an agenda together. Certainly you will have to approve your financials and things of that nature, the minutes, but we will do that for both boards.
our new chairwoman. Do you have any concerns on that? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moore.
No problem.
All right, we do have one item of new business that we would like to hit on, and that is the CDBG guidelines and properties. And I believe Mr. Baldwin has a presentation.
Just be a short update, quite frankly, and good morning, everyone, and appreciate the opportunity to be here. I would note before I get started, we have a number of people around the table been involved in the process, so if you have any particular questions on certain agencies or departments in this, I think you can get them answered, including your council liaisons. Just go back, this is a process that started a couple of years ago. Quite frankly, the city manager asked us to go back and work with PRHA and try to identify what had been a growing inventory of CDBG acquired properties that were vacant, and had a couple of issues. Obviously, they're not developed; they're off the tax rolls. In addition, there's costs for maintenance, and we had some concerns from the planning department side about CDBG program compliance with the HUD program under which the parcels were acquired. So we began through that process. Over the time before we got to the current list we had, a number of parcels came off the list because they had gone into development. For example, the new Wendy's on London had some CDBG acquired properties in that, and that obviously got developed. There's a property that's been recently approved by City Council in Effingham, the WODA mixed-use project at Effingham and Court, that has CDBG properties in it. So ultimately, as we were doing our review, we were down to 91 parcels, and that's what we presented to the EDA a few months ago at your joint meeting with City Council. After that joint meeting, we followed up. We made basically the same presentation. I think you probably all have this PowerPoint somewhere, but we can certainly get you an updated copy if you have lost yours or don't have it. But we made a similar presentation to City Council at a joint meeting with the PRHA. Kind of went down through the list and working through some discussions and suggestions on what should be done with all of these parcels to try to get them off of the sort of static position they had been in. And again, there had been a staff committee working on this. We were assessing these properties for CDBG program requirements. We were assessing in terms of potential development, in terms of zoning and lot size, and we looked at it from under the city's recently updated flood protection program. Make sure we had parcels that were developable, that type of thing. And then the presentation was done with City Council. At that time, there had been, if you recall from the presentation of the EDA, there were 39 parcels that had been identified for transfer to the EDA. And that was agreed upon at that meeting, and I believe that process has already started to move those 39 parcels between PRHA back to the EDA. The remainder of the parcels, there were a number that had been identified to remain with the PRHA. Some of those were attached to existing projects they have, such as Westbury. A large number of them were in Parkview, and the PRHA indicated at the time with council they actually had some interest. They were working with a developer in that case, so the determination was made to leave those parcels with PRHA. And there were some additional, and again, we were looking at this from a compliance with CDBG. There were two sets of parcels, you may recall. Again, we talked about there were some lots in Craddock that were they're no longer under the CDBG program. The city had actually made a cash repayment back to HUD for those. Those were free and clear lots that remained with PRHA. And again, the PRHA lots in Parkview, where the national objective has been removed. So there was no requirement to meet the HUD CDBG program national objective, but there's still a repayment required for those lots back to HUD once they're sold, and they need to be sold at fair market value. And that's just the one thing. Again, I just kind of take a step back from the planning department side. We're primarily, from our perspective, making sure that these parcels, when they're transferred or sold, meet all our program requirements. There's no one making profit off of these other than getting the lots onto the tax records. Any of the fair market value funds that were to come to the city or to PRHA, outside of any money you might have to spend for legal fees and brokerage payments and those types of, all that goes back to HUD, and they put it back into the city's CDBG line of credit. So there's really no profiting, although the city does profit in the sense that you put money back in the CDBG and these parcels come off the non-taxable and hopefully into a taxable status. Following that council meeting, the city manager has established a working group, a real estate group, which consists of Mr. Ashby from the city attorney's office. And basically the working group that was working on that before is myself, I'm chair, Mr. Moore. We have from my staff, Jeff Kreimer, who's our CDBG program manager, Meg Pittenger, who's our flood program manager. And she's also got a vast amount of experience in property maintenance. And so her first task she's actually working on now is assessing the cost for the city for maintaining parcels that were to come over to the city before they're ready to be transferred to someone, obviously, that needs to keep the grass cut and those types of things. So she's working on that. The last thing I'll just mention, one of the requirements the council set up to keep this from happening, I think, again, we have a quarterly report back that will go back to city council. The first report back to council is due to them in September. And with that, be glad to answer any questions. That's just sort of a quick update. I think we've made good progress in the last 4 or 5 months, considering we've spent 5 decades assembling the property. So I think we're making pretty good progress. Hopefully, as time goes by, at the present time, even though it's still eligible, we've taken off the idea of acquiring properties as our CDBG amounts have dwindled over the years. We've really gotten out of using CDBG program funds for property acquisition. We're primarily using it for programmatic expenditures. I think most of you are aware, money right now mostly is going out to the sportsplex. We're getting ready to do a bunch of site work out there, build a parking lot, walk and trail, refurbish the football fields. All that's coming out of our CDBG program. The gym has recently been completed. There'll be landscaping and a number of other things installed. There's been a lot of stuff that happens out there people haven't seen. We've updated all the utility infrastructure out there, which is all underground. You can't see it. There's new water, storm drainage, sewer lines, gas lines, cable, all that stuff that was lacking out there when the city acquired the property. So a lot of that money, you don't see the work going on out there, but there is actually progress going out there, and hopefully over the next 6 to 9 months, you see a lot of that happen. With that, be glad to answer any questions you have. As far as that goes, hopefully the next time we report back, we'll have more progress on property disposition.
I have a question.
I think the city manager was calling.
I'll yield to Ms. Jenkins.
Oh, thank you. The property at the corner of Turnpike and Frederick Boulevard. PRHA
That's
still-
PRHA's property.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's not a CDBG
Okay.
parcel.
We check that first.
Nice parcel.
It's, that's come up in discussion.
Turnpike Road is completed.
We check that one first.
Yeah, that comes up in discussion a lot. That is not a CDBG parcel.
Yes, ma'am.
I have 2 things. One is I'm going to ask Mr. Moore, would you please get with Mr. Pace and have the information sent to the commission regarding the opening of the sportsplex, which will take place on June 29th, but I'm not sure of the time, but Mr. Moore, get that out to you, be the grand opening. Second, going back to CDBG, coming here about almost 33 years ago, one of the things that I found in the 80s was that the city was had identified all of their CDBG monies to go toward property acquisition. I came from a very small city, which was Petersburg. And in Petersburg at that time, the CDBG monies were used to do things like we're doing now, establishing parks, updating properties that were related to humankind involvement. It was not until the 90s, early 90s, that we began, I think through my, I don't want to say consistent calling it to their attention, but we began to get a little of that money to go toward humankind efforts, which is a part of the CDBG program. But coming back and realizing that the properties that I remember being acquired were still sitting in the city with nothing being done. I think it was November of 2015. I pulled our team together and say, we must move forward in seeing exactly what we have, how we can identify these properties, what's the objectives behind us acquiring them. And truly, it has taken almost 2.5 years for this team to get to where we are. And we see the light. And the light that we see is that we will get these properties where they can get on the tax roll and begin to, the city realize monies from them through the taxes. So I really like to commend the group of which Mr. Baldwin call to your attention. And also like to commend the city council for allowing us to take the time, because they knew we were working on it, and we would say, we're still working on it. But it has taken us to this point to really get our hands around it. It took almost 40 years to get there, and now we are where we are, and we will be coming, as Mr. Moore indicated, in months to come to this commission to share with you where we are and how we feel these properties interface with the future of the EDA. So it's exciting.
Mr. Moore, I think, did you have anything you wanted to add, or are you good?
No, I think Dr. Patton summed it up. We will come back to you with some additional information as we move through the process. I will say that we have specifically focused on, from our standpoint, and I think from a team standpoint, what we would consider developable properties, more specifically properties that are adjacent to or abut properties that the EDA currently has or holds, or that the city currently has or holds, so that we can do a comprehensive redevelopment of those properties. So,
Sounds good to me. Commissioners, did you have anything you need to add?
I really would be interested in knowing if Ms. Winston would like to add something. She being deputy director with PRHA, and
we are excited to turn over these lots back to the city. You know, CDBG was really the only kind of tool or resources that cities had at one time to eliminate slum and blight. And I think that's what these funds were used to. So now we've eliminated some of the blight in the communities, but now we need to focus on the redevelopment of these sites. So I think this is the opportune time to do that.
And if I can just add my personal thought on this, I think it's great that we're doing this. From a commissioner standpoint, we keep going back to the, fiduciary duty of things. I think before we take whatever final action this group does, I think we probably should look at what our cost will be, to maintain the properties. And listening to the PRHA joint meeting with City Council, that was quite a discussion point. And I think we should probably explore that as well, just so we know what our investment on the EDA side looks like at that, and then naturally to look at our funds at that time to make sure that we are in a funding position to maintain those properties. But overall, as fast as you're moving them out of here, buddy, I think we'll be all right. So, all right, thank you all very much. We'll quickly move into commissioner comments. Commissioner Revel? No? Commissioner Jacobs? No? Commissioner Kelly?
Two quick ones just to throw out there. I was curious if staff had reached out to anybody at Mercy Hospital since the acquisitions take place before. See if there's any dialogue going on there to see what they might have any future plans for the hospital.
So we have, but without getting into details of that, we have.
Okay. And I also like to throw out there too, something that's close to me literally, physically, is the DAC Center. It's now the A-Enter. All the signs have fallen, all the letters have fallen off the building. I know it's owned by the school board, but if there's ever another situation where we might be able to work with the school board on a funding thing, perhaps that might be a property we might be able to look at acquiring as well. That's all.
Okay.
I think Dr. Patton, did you have?
Oh, I was getting ready to say we have had some meetings and dialogue with Von Secours regarding this.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent.
And I have nothing else to add. All right. We do have a need for a closed meeting. Mr. Kelly, would you actually do us the honor, sir?
Got it. Whereas the Board of Commissioners of the EDA desires to enter in a closed meeting, and whereas in compliance with the requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, the topics to be discussed are set forth below in the subparagraphs of paragraph 2.2-3711A of the Virginia Code. Authorizing discussion in closed session are set forth in parentheses after each time. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners shall meet in closed meeting for the purpose of discussing acquisition or disposition of real property interests where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body, in particularly 3125 Victory Boulevard and 801 Court Street. Zero Victory Boulevard, okay.
Yeah, and 0. All right. We have a motion.
So moved.
Mr. Hines,
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets,
Second Rebel.
He made, he motioned,
And I
he motioned, you second.
yeah.
I second that.
So, Mr. Hines, Ms. Jiggets,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yep.
Ms. Link, Ms. Revel, I'm sorry.
Yes.
All right.
Motion carries right close session. Mr. Hines,
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yep.
Ms. Revel. We're in open session.
All right, last item up for our business here is a resolution authorizing the conveyance of 3125
Okay.
Victory Boulevard.
That copy of the resolution.
I do. So they need to read.
I mean, you could read it, somebody can motion off it.
Okay. Read that, Mr. Moore?
Yes. I'm going to mess this gentleman's name up, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Whereas Mr. Agby and his assigned purchaser has offered to purchase 3125 Victory Boulevard, tax parcel 0493-0080, the property for the sum of $100,000, the purchase price. And whereas the purchase price is fair and reasonable, considering that development of the property is significantly impacted by the existence of wetlands, and whereas EDA has negotiated a purchase agreement with purchaser, the agreement to convey the property for the purchase price, and whereas conveyance of the property will place it back on the tax rolls and further private development within the city. Now therefore it is hereby resolved that the chair is authorized to execute the agreement on behalf of EDA. The chair, vice chair, and secretary of the EDA and their designees are each hereby authorized to take such further actions and execute such further applications, documents, and instruments, including without limitation, a deed conveying the property and related closing documents, as may be necessary or desirable in furtherance of the conveyance and development of the property in accordance with the agreement, as the same may be amended from time to time, provided, however, that any subsequent amendment to the agreement shall be subject to the prior authorization of the Board of Commissioners. This resolution shall be effective immediately upon its adoption.
Motion to approve?
Have a motion?
Second.
Second. Ms. Jiggets?
Mr. Hines?
Yes.
Ms. Jiggets?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yep.
Ms. Rupp? Motion carries.
All right. Being that there's no other business coming forward, adjourn the meeting. Thank you.